Dear citizens, dear guests, and dear colleagues, today is an important day for the future of European citizens and the whole world. After 3 years of hard censorship, I am very pleased that we have an opportunity to discuss the problems with World Health Organization in this Parliament. We want to start a public discussion and public action with our citizens. The World Health Organization is demanding that all countries surrender authority to declare pandemics and procure so-called vaccines into their hands. Unfortunately, today there are very few of products that we can truly call vaccines. Most of them are pharmaceutical products without any proven effectiveness that can be classified as vaccine. When we look at the donors of World Health Organization, the Gavi Alliance, also known as Vax Alliance, the Gates Foundation, Sanofi, and others, if we hand over the power to declare pandemics and procure vaccine to the World Health Organization, we can expect a rapid change from the rhythm of any epidemics every 2 years to a rhythm of 1 epidemic per month. We can expect a shift from the von der Leyen's current 11 doses of vaccine per each EU citizens to a very likely 60 to 90 doses per each person in European Union. We can almost certainly expect obligatory vaccination or even of unborn children, save the others. From their perspective in the future of the world, I believe that is a great danger for world's population. In this way, we do not leave our destiny in the hands of the World Health Organization, but in the hands of these who control it, the owners of pharmaceutical mega companies. Cycles of new pandemic campaign and so-called vaccination are ideal for population control in every sense. In terms on repressive restriction, on freedom of movement, the right of work, freedom of speech, freedom of choice, on other fundamental rights, but also as a perfect tool for regulating the size of the world population in the future. For this reason, China's great affection for the World Health Organization is not surprising. To this day, China continues to censor its social media platform TikTok when negative discussion about the World Health Organization appear. They deleted my speech, which was viewed over 4 million times in just 1 day. Even the Facebook, the well-known leader in censorship, no longer force such censorship. If we want to avoid this highly probable dark scenario, we must make an effort to raise awareness as of many citizens as possible and prevent leaving the health and lives of citizens in the hands of private pharmaceutical companies, whose real owners are actually unknown. Never know, no one knows who is the really owner of pharmaceutical companies. We know that always BlackRock, Vanguard is owner of everything, but who is behind of BlackRock and Vanguard? Today, I was much softer than usual, but we must be aware that this problem requires the strongest possible resistance in Europe and even the whole world. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a productive conference and the start of public initiative for better tomorrow of all of us. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Sorry, because I'm French and you know my accent, it will be not so well. But First of all, I would like to thank Mislav Kolokuzik and his team for organizing this event. My dear parliamentary colleagues, the international experts, and also Frederic Balden. This is the man who is demanding the removal of the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and is here, and we can applaud him. The management of the COVID crisis has been causing surprising decision-making at national, European, and global level for more than 2.5 years. With the lack of transparency and active cooperation with Big Pharma have been the hallmark of our institution, which have not hesitated to flout our individual and collective freedoms in the name of the safety of all and the fight against the virus. It is to be feared that with an international treaty on pandemics, which is moreover legally binding, our member states will be dispossessed of their sovereignty in terms of health, and that aberrant and unfair measures, such as the suspension of unvaccinated caregivers, be perpetuated. Throughout the past year of the COVID Commission has met, the elements that will remain in our minds are also the repeated refusals of the main players to respond to our invitation, like WHO President Tedros was among those who refused to intervene. The COVID Commission was unable to summon her, like Mr. Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, or Ursula von der Leyen. The 5th of June, the World Health Organization has announced that it will use the European Union Digital COVID Certificate to launch our global digital certification system thanks to a historic partnership to strengthen global health security, according to its director, which states that the future system should help facilitate mobility and protect citizens around the world against current and future threats to health, including pandemics. But who asked that? This global organization therefore tacitly validates the failure of the European Union in terms of management of the pandemic and vaccination policy with a flagrant lack of transparency, conflicts of interest, and draconian measures linked to the health pass. Transferring this power to the WHO is tantamount to creating a sort of world health government, dispossessed states of their sovereignty and further alienating citizens from decision makers. In this management of a pandemic, the state remains the best level to adapt its measures to real situation without falling into the ears of generalized draconian measures, such as confinement, of prohibition of access to certain public places, which are not always justified. We are opposed to the establishment of this global governance, the tools of which will have significant consequences of the private lives of citizens who are increasingly subject to the draconian measures imposed by unelected technocrats in globalized structures. Thank you again to be there. Thank you, we need you, and because we're keeping this fight, and thank you again to be there.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much to all of you for being here. I have to tell you that 2 years and a few months ago, when we started to express our public concerns about the digital COVID certificate and the fact that our rights as individuals, as well as MEPs, were severely violated, we did not expect that our message is gonna travel all across the world multiple times. Because when we had the first press conference, a few hours later after we placed the conference online, we received hundreds, if not thousands, of emails every day from people, from elected officials, from non-governmental organizations, from judges, from prosecutors, from journalists, all of them telling us that they shared the same concerns as us, but they did not realize that there are some public voices from a high-level authority, I would say, to express or to share the same concerns as them. When we started that press conference and then all the activities that we've done together afterwards, we realized that actually people all across the world are hungry are thirsty for freedom. They want their own officials to be accountable and to respond in front of the public. So the alternative that was presented to us with this pandemic, this was the best opportunity for some elites that are not elected by anybody, who are not accountable to anybody, to pretty much hijack, day by day, month by month, year by year, more and more of our rights, more and more of our assets, because we see that happening right now in many countries. You saw what happened in Canada, for example, when the truckers protested against Trudeau. He ordered that their bank accounts be blocked, and that happened. And at that point, we did not even have, they did not even have in Canada, the digital currency. Imagine what will happen when on your phone you will have the digital wallet, the digital currency, the digital vaccination certificate. So we saw what happened. And now just imagine in your worst case scenario what will happen if we allow the WHO to have so much power over our states, over our governments, our elected officials, and even over our judiciary. Because over the years, over the centuries, I would say, when the modern state was developed, we had the so-called separation of power in the state. You had what we have, the executive power, legislative power, and the judicial power. And the reason why the power was split among three different powers in the state was that the individual rights of every person be protected, be safeguarded. So in case the executive power or the legislative power is abusing your rights, you can go in front of the judicial power or the constitutional court to challenge a law or to challenge an administrative decision. Now imagine what would happen if all of this decisional power would be passed over to WHO. Can they stay in court? Can the head of WHO justify his decision, for example, to proclaim a pandemic across the world in front of a judge? Because they can't right now. So the biggest threat that we are facing right now is a threat to our national sovereignty, to the supremacy of our constitutions, and implicitly, unfortunately, to our fundamental rights. Because if all of these powers that were granted through our constitutions to our national institutions or authorities will be handed over to a global institution that is not accountable to anybody, who's led by people who are not elected by us as citizens, then we are done with our rights. Because they can easily just pass a decision, or whatever you want to call it, to declare a pandemic. Once that is declared, the governments can impose draconical restrictive measures, and you will not be able to challenge that. In Romania, for example, the country that I proudly represent here, during the pandemic, there was not an official document, an official act released, submitted by any Romanian governmental agencies to declare in Romania a pandemic. So there were people challenging the pandemic in court, and the government came and said, well, there's a press release from WHO, and based on that press release that says, well, as of tomorrow there's going to be a pandemic, we behaved in a certain way. So imagine a press release played the role of implementing or calling something a pandemic. And we did not even have the treaty that they are talking about. So I'm glad that all of you are here today. I'm looking forward to sharing with all of us and with all the Europeans your insights. And I'm looking forward to working with you, not only to support all the initiatives that you have, but also to make people of Europe aware that in 2024, in the month of June, for the European parliamentarian elections, they have a very clear option and choice to make: freedom or tyranny, democracy or lack of democracy, transparency or lack of transparency. And as I said at the beginning of our press conferences, the difference between democracy and tyranny is very simple. When you know everything about your government, that is democracy. When the government knows everything about you, that is tyranny. So let's fight together to maintain democracy in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my dear colleagues, my dear guests. As always, this is one of our many events. I'm very honored to be with you here today. And I get the impression that with every passing year, the WHO is becoming less and less about health and medical science and more about politics and lobbying. Less about health policies and more about selling and promoting certain products made by pharmaceutical companies, most notably vaccines. WHO has failed humanity in COVID crisis and must be held accountable. They have trampled on human rights and medical ethics and behaved more like public relation agency for those pharmaceutical companies. WHO is corrupt, and it is more corrupt the higher in hierarchy in the organization structure you go. Many of the employees, including top jobs, are linked to private interests following the principle of revolving doors. As you know, WHO is heavily dependent on private donors, such as Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Bloomberg Foundation, and Rockefeller Foundation. And of course, WHO is also dependent on big pharmaceutical companies that have a seat on governance board of Gavi. Gavi is another top financial contributor to WHO. Their contribution, the private contributors, and their influence shadows hundreds of member countries, especially the ones in Africa, Asia, and South America. Also, since we are in European Parliament, one of the top financial contributors to the WHO is European Commission, the so-called government of European Union. The behavior of this European Commission in COVID crisis can be described as corruption, incompetence, and disaster. Can you imagine that the one person who arranged everything with Pfizer and also other pharmaceutical companies, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the Commission, was protected by her political group and never came to a committee hearing to answer some very important questions, questions that deal with billions of euros and hundreds of millions of citizens. No, she never came to that hearing. She avoided it. But then they said, all right, there won't be any hearing in the COVID committee, the special committee. We'll make our own hearing in the bureau, in the presidency of the parliament. But in the end, not even that happened. Not even this tiny piece of smoked and mirrored transparency happened. So not even this event that was supposed to happen behind closed door ever happened. Is this democracy? Is this transparency? It is not. It is not. And the final report of the COVID committee even failed to report in a proper way on this first step of problems that we had during COVID crisis, and this is transparency. Even on that first step, it failed to deliver. This pandemic treaty that we speak of is nothing more than an attempt by WHO to get more power, more control, and more money. They want to take health policy from sovereign nations to a centralized body, globalist, bureaucratic body, technocratic body. That's not what we want. That's not what I want. This is not why I'm here. I want these policies to remain and to be made at home in our national institutions. I fully support the European Citizens' Initiative, freedom and trust, due to its democratic, legal, and awareness-raising implications. And finally, we must not give up our sovereignty to non-elected, highly corrupt, criminal, private international organization that acts solely for financial gain with every passing year. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming today. And thank you, Misla, for really putting in the work and making this happening today. And I really will have to say, I am so very honored to be here with 7 very brave citizens who came here today to launch an initiative for a European Citizens Initiative, an initiative which will hopefully be accepted by the EU Commission, although I don't really hold my breath, to be quite frank, but I seriously hope we will be able to do that. These 7 citizens are so incredibly brave because they stand up against this despicable attempts by the globalitarian misanthropists to strip us of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. They simply say no to the attempts of granting an unelected body governing powers. They simply say no. And that's what we all should do, because this will end if we simply say no. And that's what we're here to do today. Because an unelected body like WHO, who is controlled and run by multi-billionaires, should never be allowed to act in place of a democratically elected government. Never, ever. In democracies, ladies and gentlemen, it is government of the people, by the people, for the people. And any government of anywhere in the world who disregards this fundamental principle of democracy by supporting this unprecedented power grab by WHO is an anti-democrat demonstrating nothing but his utter contempt for the people. And these 7 brave citizens, they will not stand for this, and neither will we. I will expose anyone, whether it's a member of a government in a member state or a government around the world, or a member of parliament in the European member states or parliaments around the world, who do not respect the people and do not respect democracy. I will see to it they will be exposed. Each and every one of them, by name. Because guess what? There's elections coming up, and the people might be interested in who is responsible for the abolition of democracy. So we are here today to tell you, WHO globalitarian misanthropists, we are here today to tell you, you picked this fight, you wanted this fight, well, guess what? You've got it. Let's fight. Because these brave citizens, my colleagues and I, we will not tire to fight you every step of the way. These brave 7 citizens and millions more around the world, these are the people you will have to reckon with from now on. Because we are millions around the world. It is you that is the small fringe minority. You are the ones who do not have the right to dictate to the people what they want and what they don't want. So, take it from me, take it from us, take it from these 7 citizens who gathered here today. Take it from the millions and millions of people around the world. We will bring you down, and we will not tire until we have done just that. So brace yourselves. We are here, and the fight is on. So let's have the fight. Let's commence with the fights. Why don't we? Thank you.
Thank you, Justina, and thank you very much to the MEPs for inviting us to this great presentation of this European Citizens Initiative. It's a privilege to be here and to assist this project, and I shall not start without thanking the 7 European citizens that had this brave idea to start this European Citizen Initiative. Thank you very much. I guess this is the first time that European citizens, under the time of Corona, took this step and this possibility to bring back democracy and to bring back debate about this important topic into the European Parliament after the brave attempts and all the initiatives that have been done already by those members of Parliament that have opened the session. And now I have the privilege to briefly summarize the situation from a legal point of view. Why are we here? Because we all experienced since early 2020 an unprecedented excess and abuse of power of governments at the same time all over the world. They did what they did under the leadership of the World Health Organization under the pretext of a perpetuated war against a virus. Almost all countries in Europe participated, and they participated in a perpetuated pandemic regime of restrictions ever and ever extended, but never proven by scientific methods. Scientific best practice standards and fundamental human rights were totally put aside. Freedom of movement, self-determination, bodily autonomy, free speech, free information, economic freedoms, and most sadly, human dignity. No chance for a defense against this excess of power. No effective judicial control. I had to experience that with many of my fellow lawyers in the past 3 years. Every case anew, we had the hope to actually make the judges consider the legally relevant facts, but we failed. In none of the many court cases, judges were willing to listen. Now, and even no parliament in Europe until these days called its government back to reason, back to normal, even until these days. And what otherwise would be considered the normal thing to do, a global basic standard of quality management, meaning a serious reassessment in order to learn from the past for the future, that seems doesn't to exist anymore under WHO's COVID pandemic. And under this regime, millions of people and also the economy suffered from useless and harmful countermeasures. People were forced into millions of days of quarantine, isolation, masks, regular testing, restriction, and so on and so on. Even children had to do and to suffer all of this. But most significantly, experimental substances were pushed under people's skin. And just thanks to the most powerful marketing campaign ever promoted in history by governments and health authorities, with the slogan, "No one is safe until everybody is vaccinated," the public was made believe that there is no alternative and that these new technology-based vaccines were highly effective and safe. The public was misled, and the results can today be seen. Now, this is the most dangerous aspect in the past 3 years. It was the violation of the integrity of our body, our right of self-determination to make our own choice regarding what kind of medication we want to apply. And we want to do it based on accurate and correct information. And this is why we are here today. There was no protection of this most personal and most vulnerable aspect of our life in the past, and there will be no in the future if we don't act today. Even less protection, because now the WHO is about to finalize its ultimate extension of power, and instead of looking back and correcting the errors and give back the power of free competition of science, they continue with even a stricter power grab. And the European Commission has established a series of regulations and even a small agency, pandemic agency called HERA, as the junior partner of WHO. And just recently, some weeks ago, we have learned about the digital COVID certificates. Now, today. These brave 7 European citizens from 7 different EU countries have decided to take action with this instrument of the European Citizens' Initiative. This initiative allows EU citizens to directly participate in EU legislation and in policy making, and under such an initiative, European citizens can invite the European Commission to take action in areas where the Commission has the power to legislate. Now, with this ECI, the abbreviation, these brave European citizens do request the Commission to adopt a comprehensive set of legal acts that recognize and strengthen the protection of individual sovereignty and responsibility for all decisions that impact individuals and their children, including medical choices. These principles are grounded in the fundamental rights of human dignity and integrity in many different conventions, among others, not only in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European People. Article 3 reads, "Everyone has the right to respect for his and her physical and mental integrity in the fields of medicine and biological. The following must be respected, in particular, the free and informed consent." And free and informed consent means that it's based on true and accurate information. And there are many other conventions. I spare you with the list, but just as a small hint, the United Nations has issued a series of relevant, supportive, and very important conventions. But one is of particular importance in this respect, and this is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, concluded in 1966, because in its Article 7, it says, "No one shall be subjected without his free consent to medical and scientific experimentation," and this even applies in times of public emergency which threatens the life of the nation and the existence of which is officially proclaimed. So this is mandatory international law and must be respected and shall be put into this initiative as a driving factor. Now, this is a small first step, but it is an important one. And it will be a first important step to defend our right of self-determination and to say no to every power that ignores personal integrity, and to defend the right to decide what we want to have in our body and in the body of our children. It shall be also seen as a start of a wider campaign across Europe and the world to finally establish and foster public debate and public awareness of the ever more restrictive, authoritarian, and totally anti-democratic global development of WHO. Together, we will restore democracy. We will bring back human rights and human dignity to our countries and bring those who tried to abolish all of these principles and values to justice. Thank you very much.
I'm Matthias de Smet. I'm a professor of clinical psychology at Ghent University. I also hold a master degree in statistics. In the lecture, also on psychological processes and group dynamics in our culture and society. And in the latter context, I published a book about 1.5 years ago, which was titled The Psychology of Totalitarianism. And in that book, I argued that we really are at risk in our society to lapse from a democratic system into a new kind of totalitarianism, a kind of technocratic new totalitarianism. And I think that, for instance, the new treaty of the WHO is a major leap forward in this direction. It's a major leap forward in the direction of a society in which global institutions unilaterally and top-down impose their policy, for instance, their health policy, to society and to the population. For me, the strange thing in all this, or one of the strange things in all this, is that these institutions represent themselves as if they are the summum, the ultimate products of the tradition of the Enlightenment. And I wonder whether they still remember how the tradition of Enlightenment started, whether they still know the seminal texts, the seminal texts that were at the beginning of the tradition of Enlightenment. For instance, the texts of people like Voltaire and Kant. I would like to read together with them Kant's text on, which was titled, What is Enlightenment? In this text, Kant argues that the ultimate goal of the tradition of Enlightenment should always be to create a citizen that is capable of thinking of himself and that dares to speak out his thoughts in public space. And Kant even mentions in the second paragraph, I think it can be the third one, he even mentions that such a citizen doesn't accept a teacher who tells him what is right or wrong. He doesn't accept a priest that tells him what is good and evil. And he also doesn't accept a doctor that tells him what is healthy and what is not healthy. So that's what Kant had in mind. The tradition of the Enlightenment should produce citizens that dare to speak out in public space and that think for themselves. Sapere aude, think for yourself. And I think that, in my opinion, well, we cannot move more in the other direction than accepting that institutions such as the WHO, top-down indeed, impose and tell us what medical treatments we should undergo. It's not in the spirit of the Enlightenment to do so, and in the end, maybe the WHO thinks that they do not so much represent the tradition of Enlightenment, but rather rationality or even science. Well, I think also from a rational point of view, it simply doesn't make sense to impose medical treatments to a population. I can summon numerous reasons why it is irrational and not scientific to do so, but I will only mention one. All researchers that have investigated the efficacy of medical treatments throughout the last 100 years have concluded that the lion's share of the efficacy of a treatment is due to a so-called placebo effect, often up to 80%. Up to 80%. So meaning that it's the subjective attitude of someone towards the medical treatment he uses that will determine to a large extent whether the treatment is efficacious or not. And if you impose a treatment to someone who doesn't want it, that means that you never can say that you do it for the health of the person. Never. It just doesn't make sense. I could summon numerous other arguments just to show that what is happening now in this world, this evolution towards a technocratic society, is neither in the spirit of the Enlightenment and is definitely not rational or scientific. It's irrational, absurd, and unscientific, and against the tradition of the Enlightenment. So I think that is one of the main reasons why I'm here and why I support the European Citizen Initiative, and also why I'm grateful towards the MEPs that made it possible for us to speak here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Justina Walker, and I am here today as a Polish citizen and one of the 7 European citizens to introduce to you this European Citizens Initiative project that we have been working on. Over the last 3 years, we as individuals and collectively as citizens watched our governments and our representatives very closely. We voiced our opinions, we've marched the streets to be heard, and we made every effort to create a dialogue. However, as we stand here today, we realize that the world in which the citizen's opinion and citizen's voice as primary factor in making decisions is slipping away. We have seen non-governmental entities injecting themselves into our health, into our homes, into our privacy, and into our wealth. This is not what we as people want, and this is not what we as people need. The reason we choose to give our vote or our backing to our representatives in any capacity is because we do not want the unelected, self-proclaimed leaders to decide on our behalf. This includes negotiating with private, non-transparent organizations such as WHO, and in the process ignoring objections of the citizens. We as people not only choose, we put our trust in you, and the trust has been broken. Today, what we see is these unelected, disconnected from the average man or a woman's view technocrats, pushing their vision of the world on us and being helped to do so by our own representatives. There have been many petitions, there have been many declarations, and many of us have come together on European and global level to say no to this power grab that we are seeing currently. With implementation of such tools as international health amendments and WHO treaty, both to be introduced in European countries and beyond in May 2024, we are facing further push from these unelected, self-appointed organizations and individuals who want to make decisions about our freedom of choice. And so, with loss of trust in our governments and the institutions, with growing craving of these unelected entities to curb our freedoms, we as citizens decided to use the ECI, which is the European Citizens Initiative, as a tool to be publicly recognized and finally heard. European Citizens Initiative, as my colleague Philippe has said prior, was introduced with the Treaty of Lisbon in 2007. It was inspired by Switzerland and its existing direct democracy tools. It aims at increasing direct democracy by allowing EU citizens to participate in development of EU policies. Nowadays, we are hearing more frequently that the European Parliament and the European Commission see the disconnect between the people and the institutions, and yet they proceed to listen to these self-elected representatives, such as Director General of the WHO or head of a non-profit organization such as World Economic Forum. This continuous curbing of freedom and loss of trust is the reason why we want to introduce the Trust and Freedom Initiative. Thanks to the tremendous work of our team, that includes not only doctors, lawyers, activists, but also us as mothers and fathers, people from different walks of life, we will be putting forward our ECI, the European Citizens Initiative, to the European Commission within the coming weeks. And we are asking all citizens of Europe, when this happens, to sign it electronically if possible in your country, or by finding or contacting us to create an event in your community to collect signatures. This is the opportunity for your voice to be heard, your voice as an individual and your voice as a collective, so that these grand halls and chambers of European institutions where the lobbyists negotiate their private agendas to the detriment of all of us, not only echo somewhere there in the distance, but reverberate loud our objections, starting here in Brussels. Within the next months, we aim to collect 1 million signatures across Europe to show our unity. With a team of lawyers, the Trust and Freedom Initiative is being prepared, and all information will be available here in Europe, but also globally via our social media and website. What we need is to adopt a comprehensive set of legal acts that recognizes and strengthens the protection of every individual citizen, every man, every woman, every child. I want to thank the MEPs for standing with us and supporting our effort. I also want to say that the success of the initiative can only be achieved together by all of us here in Europe, no matter who we are and where we come from. What we need is trust and freedom, and both cannot be dictated by few, nor ignored by those who we choose to represent us. Because freedom is for no man to take, and trust needs to be earned, not bought. Thank you. And with that said, I'm going to hand over again to my colleague Matthias, just to say why he is a part of the ECI with us.
Yes. Well, I'm here in the first place because, well, from the beginning of the corona crisis, okay, I'll try to speak louder or bend forward a little bit. Yes. So from the beginning of the corona crisis, I started to speak out because I had the feeling that if I didn't speak out now, I should never speak out again in my life. And that's exactly what I think your initiative intends to do. It's allowing citizens to speak out. In my situation, I was speaking out in the first place as a professor in psychology, who noticed that there were very strange things going on in our society. And I noticed how most people, maybe up to 70%, bought into a narrative that in so many respects was utterly absurd and blatantly wrong. And I just noticed how people in one way or another seem to lack all capacity to take a critical distance of the narrative that was seizing power in society. And at the same time, so I noticed, for instance, that this narrative dramatically overrated the dangerousness of the virus immediately. I immediately noticed that. I noticed that probably by the mortality of the virus was overrated with a percentage of about 1,000%. I think it was rated 10 times more mortal than it actually was, and also people seem to be blind collectively for the collateral damage of the measures. And that for me was the moment when I decided to try to bring to people's attention what psychological processes could have been happening there. And I of course, as many people know, I understood what was happening in terms of a collective mass formation and an emerging totalitarianism. And at the same time, as I was thinking about the phenomenon, I noticed that the historical examples of similar situations in which mass formations emerged all showed that the only thing we can do about such a situation, about such a collective, a group dynamic where people become collectively blind and start to become extremely intolerant for people who think differently, that the only thing you can do about this is continuing to speak out. And I think that's something we have to be aware of. If we don't want things to get much worse, then we will have to find the courage, each and every one of us in its own way, to speak out and to articulate our opinion when it goes against the dominant discourse. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I support this initiative.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Maria Hubmer-Mock. I'm a medical doctor and mother from Austria. And over the past years, I became an activist. Lockdowns for the unvaccinated and mandatory vaccination in my home country showed me how fast steps can be set by the people in power. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to the MEPs for their bravery and for taking a stand against the draconian measures over the past years. And I want to thank my fellow colleagues here that bring in the initiative. I want to thank today's speakers. All these messages should set a clear sign throughout the world that a change towards a brighter future is definitely possible if we unite in our efforts. The Great Awakening is happening worldwide. And yes, I also refer to a film here that had its premiere recently, showing in-depth knowledge of some of today's speakers. Over the last years, I've been in contact with so many different people in various organizations worldwide. It is clear that it is within human nature that we cannot always be of the same opinion in details, and we do not have to. But we can be so immensely strong if we find the smallest common denominator as a basis of incredible, effective work. I urge people to open their eyes to the potential threat and the future harms to our lives and liberties. I want to encourage all people of all different walks of life to stand with us, to sign the European Citizen Initiative once set free for the signature process, if you are from a European member state, or to start similar action on your own continent. Furthermore, I kindly ask our fellow human beings from around the world to join efforts to expose the power grab from entities which are not elected by the citizens and who are definitely not working for the greater good of the people. I encourage people to step outside the process of mass psychosis into a state of individual resilience that automatically will lead into a big, resilient crowd. Reach out to your regional communities and politicians. Make them aware of what is happening. The ECI will help to encourage people to take action. We are many, and we will be so many more soon. I want to bring up a quote by J. Edward Griffin. He said that any change in history has been made by the 10 to 15%. We are, by now, way more already. We have reached the critical mass. People from all walks of life are invited to join forces, because now is the time for the inspirers of change, the planters of seeds and the bringers of truth, for the independent media that has the courage to break through, for the filmmakers that reveal the lies to free our minds, for the singer-songwriters and poets to write and sing of freedom and liberty, for the artists to create a new picture of the world, for the scholars of law who uphold honesty and integrity, for the wisdom of the healers, teachers and guides who remind us that the truth is in sight if we only look and see. Now is the time to see that the light is more powerful than the darkness could ever be, and nurture our resilience deep within. Independent media is a key factor and so important. Thank you to all media outlets. Thank you to the independent media for spreading crucial information and to report on today's initiation event. I also want to remind us all that yesterday, on July 3rd, was Julian Assange's birthday. We sent Julian our best wishes, and I want to quote Goethe, who said, "The living should hope." We need to raise the volume on the sound of freedom in so many areas. And I want to end my speech with the invitation to every person out there to watch out for a film that is based on a true story with this exact title, The Sound of Freedom, that has its premiere today on July 4th. And please save the date. We warmly invite people from all over Europe and from throughout the world to come to our Europe for Trust and Freedom rally to the city of Vienna in Austria on October 1st, 2023. It will be wonderful to experience the feeling of unity at such a big in-person live event. And you will find further information on our webpage, theeuci.info. Thank you so much.
Is among all options the World Health Organization an organization we should trust? Yet the WHO has no democratic legitimacy, nor are there any independent supervisory boards to effectively monitor the organization's work. And now a legally binding international pandemic treaty, really? I'm the father of 4 children. I have been a lawyer for 28 years now, and I'm involved as an advocate for fundamental rights and democracy with the German Lawyers Association, Lawyers for Enlightenment. And since the last weekend, also a member of the International Association of Lawyers for Human Rights, which we have founded exactly last weekend in Cologne to unite all critical thinking lawyers worldwide who still care about human rights. With that background, and also with the background that I'm a journalist and also a book author, I have written a book, Corona State, in which I retell the events surrounding Corona from a German perspective and classify them from a legal point of view. With that background, the goals of the treaty scare me. They do not reassure me. Early detection and prevention of pandemics means, I fear, the establishment of a global early warning and surveillance system. Establishing and strengthening the WHO as the coordinating authority for global health issues probably has the practical effect of disempowering national and local health authorities, and this fundamentally contradicts the principle of subsidiarity. Why call for an international regulation when a problem can be solved just as well or even better nationally or locally? Strengthening of international cooperation in areas such as surveillance, warnings and response probably means the establishment of a global surveillance system of citizens by the states, enforced by the WHO. And this amounts to a complete control and foreign domination and measurements, such as restrictions of the freedom to travel, the right of residence, freedom of movement, and all of them would probably be very easy to implement under those circumstances. In my opinion, the worldwide fight against false information would ultimately mean nothing other than the introduction of censorship at the discretion of the World Health Organization. All four goals would lead to a global surveillance and paternalism system of the World Health Organization. In the past corona pandemic, for example, the WHO showed through a global failure that it was at no time able to assess the situation correctly. The transfer of power to an anonymous, non-democratically legitimized organization with mafia-like structures, which is supplied from dubious sources of money and is close to the pharmaceutical lobby, to put it mildly, and which in future is to determine uncontrollably when a pandemic has broken out, when it is over, and how people worldwide are then to behave, is to be decisively rejected. The whole thing is made even more dramatic by the fact that governments, like the German government, are now linking the pandemic treaty issue with the second issue, climate change. Those who argue in this way obviously want the World Health Organization to be able to declare health crisis at its discretion and send people into further lockdowns or other measures as needed. But I do not want an anonymous world organization to decide for me, and certainly not for my children. I don't want anyone like those organizations to decide in future how to behave, how I have to behave in a crisis that may once again not be a real one, but only a man-made one. Jurists like me reject ideologies and totalitarian movements with a claim to absoluteness. I reject that an abstract construct of a public health is declared the global goal for all, whereas personal health has to take a backseat. Decisions on how to deal with health and illness must always be made by the individual and must not be shifted to the international level and an opaque network of organizations and responsibilities. I reject the idea that in the future not only actual diseases but a mix of data analysis, computer models, artificial intelligence, and test results should justify risk assessment at the discretion of the World Health Organization. If the treaty plans outlined were to be realized, decisions on how a society should deal with diseases, prevention, and epidemics, and that could be any wave of influenza, would be removed from the democratic process in many ways. The leverage of an impending public climate or public health emergency can be used without any barrier to monitor and control populations. According to this logic, the monitoring must take place permanently, because otherwise, according to this logic, it is not possible to recognize at an early stage when a state of emergency is imminent. I reject this. I also reject the fact that every person is considered a potential danger as long as she or he has not proven his harmlessness. None of this describes the world I want to live in. It's not the picture of a world I want to pass on to my children. Therefore, it's a clear no to a totalitarian world government engineered by WHO. Thank you.
Hi, I'm known as Vicky Cation from Portugal. My name is Isabel, and several names that never end, so I'm not going to tell them all. We the Portuguese like lots of names. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to deeply thank the members of the European Parliament that invite us to support the European Citizens Initiative. It is with my great gratitude and heart that I will say, in behalf of the Portuguese people, thank you very much for this opportunity, and for our Lusitano soul finally are represented here in this parliament, the Portuguese soul. Sam, thank you very much. We have never, thank you. Maybe I'll start crying in the middle, we never know, you know. We have never experienced a moment as in the last 3 years. People are afraid to say what they stand for, afraid to say what they are thinking. The suppression of dissident voices has and is well calculated. Move across the mainstream through censorship, disqualification of truth, repeating daily false reports of virus, death, war, climate, and now about a simple fact of biology, gender. At the beginning of 2020, thousands of scientists, doctors, health professionals were silenced. Accounts and holders of sovereign bodies in many countries were censored. Hundreds of thousands of posts were deleted. Out from brainwashing, censorship, and condition of all kinds of freedom movements. The neuro-linguistic method used by repeating a narrative succeeds in frightening most people into an unspeakable obedience. Now they are using it again. In Portugal, as well in many other countries, access to health, medical treatments, consultation, diagnosis, and surgery have been cancelled. The consequences of these measures are too serious to be ignored here or all over the world. And these consequences will last for several years yet to come. The loss of many lives, and that has a name: genocide. It's very evident that the world is the victim of someone that holds the power and the puppets with no empathy whatsoever for anyone. The imposition of the respective certificates has never been less than an insult to our intelligence and freedom. The pushback the same certificate will deprive us all for the beginning and the principal pillars of sovereignty and freedom. Make no mistake, all of this due to National Socialist left, extreme left, and many others disguised as something else policies, but all in collusion for the implementation of extreme poverty in Europe countries. They are creating the foundation of frightening regimes where values are inverted. The invasion of our lives, the control of our money, impending the growth of our quality of life is our reality now. The state exists today to destroy punish, persecute, and expropriate us from everything, even our soul. And suicide increases because of despair. Somewhere, at some point, the values became inverted, and life means nothing to these people. About my country, Portugal, the Portugal people, I'm sorry. I told you I'll start crying. Each time I talk about my country, the Portuguese people are being strangled by taxes and more taxes and terrible decisions to end the opportunity of work and growth. Maternity wards and pediatric wards are closed. Our cities are full of homeless people. Too many lost their houses to banks that double their raise interest too soon with no warrant. I wonder, what are the Portuguese parliamentarians doing here in this house? What they are doing about this and so much more I will have to say. This European formula is not working for us anymore. It is time for the European Union to recognize that we are on the brink, on the end of the European social project. It doesn't exist. What exists now does not represent European people, where they are almost no European at all. That's one other reason, amongst many other reasons, that people, as well as this Parliament, must support the European Citizens' Initiative in order to become truly a project to safeguard us and not to destroy and exclude us from our homeland and safety. The solution is to work with us and not against us, so this Parliament become our European home again. Finally, we don't ask, we legitimately demand that these rights, the rights of children, must be respected in the first place, and that is whole doctrine of sexualization with a clear path towards the normalization of pedophile ends right now. May this institution emanate with dignity that respect for the innocents and for all families without any distinction of orientation. Family is family, no matter what, as long as they defend and preserve the dignity, respect, and safety of a child. I know that because I'm the mother of 5 and grandmother of 7. Children do not belong to the state or any organization whatsoever. Our human rights are inalienable, just like our freedom, and we do not recognize the WHO legitimacy to decide strictly anything about our lives. The World Health Organization aims for countries to surrender their sovereignty. But let me say this very clear. No one has the authority to hand over the sovereignty of a people to a third party without clear information and total consent. And if they do so by changing or overstep our constitution, it will be high treason to homeland. And this is the most important reason for every country, every single person, support, enjoy the European Citizens' Initiative. So together we live a legacy of truth, democracy, security, and freedom for the future of humanity. Today, with the strength of this initiative and your strength, your example, the parliamentarians that invite us here and support us through all these years, these 3 years, may the world and Portugal listen to these words and support our initiative. And for my fellow resilience and resistance people in Portugal, I will always end like we always do. People like all of us, we never, never give up. Thank you very much for having me and listening to me. Thank you. Obrigada.
So, hello, friends. I was expecting that there will be more members of European Parliament, so my speech is made a little bit for them. Unfortunately, only the brave ones are here. And let me start with saying thank you very much for your job for the last years, what you are doing. That's the first. Thank you. thank you especially to Mr. Kolakusic, who invited us, and to Christina Andersen, who supported the initiative with very strong words. So thank you also to Justina Walker, who started the initiative, and because of her, we are here. So my name is Ladislav Vrabel. I come from Czech Republic, and I wrote my speech because English is not my native language. I came here from a country where people are arrested, sent to the court, and punished for their political views, where the state is censoring private media and its own citizens. I myself have been illegally arrested and sentenced for my political views. You can read on the Home Office website that the government is paying communication experts and psychologists for strategies to prevent political ideas of activists from reaching the public. People in my country are forbidden to obtain information, are manipulated by the omnipresent propaganda, and are afraid to speak their minds. The trend is not improving. On the contrary, the European Parliament is preparing new laws to control the content on social media. That means, and I'm not now talking to you particularly, but those members who are not here, that means you are about to silence the people who gave you the voice. And even more than this, you are handing over this power to a largely privately founded and controlled organization, the WHO. So tell me, honorable members, why we voted you? To forbid us from getting information, to censor the public discussion, to hand over the power of decision to a rich private investors. Look, Bill Gates is a person like me, like you, or like my colleagues here. If we assume living in a democracy, I mean, Bill has the same rights and responsibilities under the law as any other person, right? We know that. People didn't elect him to make laws for them. So if you transfer the right to make decisions, which you got by the people electing you, to private investors, you have destroyed parliamentary democracy. And if you allow these landlords to tell us when we can and cannot leave the house, when we can cross city or state borders, or what we, the people, can and cannot say, you have turned our democracy into a new version of feudalism, because they are landlords. So let's wake up from this terrible dream. Freedom of speech cannot be limited without being lost. So let's speak openly, publicly, loudly, and free. I would like to comment what Matthias Desmet, the hero, said in the beginning, because he is the example. He is the one who convinced me to continue to speaking. Even I was arrested, sentenced by the court, and prosecuted, because we really have to keep speaking. This is when the totalitarian is coming, when the people are afraid, they are counting on us that we will be speaking. There are many bright people here I met, amazing people from all the world, and thank you all that you are speaking. I think this is the major thing what we have to keep, speaking openly and freely. So let's go back to the freedom, power to the people. I'm not sure if we win, but let's give it a chance. All people for freedom together. Thank you very much.